Hi, everyone. It is the Ego Project. I am Lisa Heidle.
And I'm Cristine Seidell.
And we are here with
Jena Young.
Jena Young. Very good. Oh, good job, Jena. Okay. And we are so excited because we are going to be talking about the ego and leadership today. And Jena is just a font of information and insight about leadership and the ego work that she has done and is inspiring other people to do. So I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, Jena, let people get to know who you are. Jena Young is a restaurateur and inn owner in Bar Harbor, Maine. She has found her niche as an authentic leader by focusing on her inner development and healing. Her philosophy sees everyone as a leader, regardless of their roles in life, because everyone has influence in their own lives. She is passionate about leadership development and assisting others to look inward in order to lead outward. She began her business career as an ill-equipped leader who had to learn the hard way. She enjoys taking the opportunity to help others find an easier path. Her businesses include Thrive Juice Bar and Kitchen, Side Street Cafe, and Yellow House Inn. Okay, Jena. Oh, that's a great bio. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I have a lot of different roles in life. I'm a mom. I really focused, on the professional piece there, but touching on how we are all leaders, and I play a leadership role at home. Sometimes when I'm planning a group vacation, I play a leader planning a dinner. People have this idea about leadership that it's this big ominous word in the corporate world, and it's really something that we all carry a piece of that with us. And so I really like to be clear on that when I'm talking to people, because it's very quick. People are very quick to say, well, I'm not a leader. It's just like an artist. Like, well, I'm not an artist. I'm not artistic. And we all have a little bit of that in us. And to be able to harness that and show up as our best selves really gets me excited.
Oh, that's so good.
I
so agree. Yeah, with that. Because once again, I'm the CEO of my life.
Yeah.
Right. And if you are able to take that bird's eye view, you can see areas that need improvement. You can see areas that you're doing well in all aspects of your life. So thank you for sharing that. Do you agree with that, Cristine?
Absolutely. I love that. Just kind of add on there. And I think that in so many different facets of our life, whether it's personal or professional, leadership is going to be a space that we move on a spectrum, and some of us maybe feel a little bit more comfortable in activating and initiating leadership. And some of us may feel more comfortable when we are invited into leadership. But I think it's really important that, we are cognizant of we all encompass the qualities that are required for leading others. So I think that's a really cool way to kind of, shape today's conversation.
Oh, that's so good. We're going to go ahead and jump into some questions, Jena. I'm so curious about your journey with this. I've watched a lot of your Instagram post, which is, by the way, Jena Young 2.0. Check her out and follow her. Such good information in such a short amount of time. Right. And which I'm like, oh, concise and to the point. I'm learning from you. So I'm so curious about what was the catalyst for your ego healing journey?
Wow. I started businesses long before I actually knew what I was doing. I underestimated the challenge. And I think that's for the best. I think that I was meant to take this journey, and had I really not had that little bit of like naivety about it, I probably wouldn't have taken the leap. And I'm glad that I did in hindsight. But I jumped in and had a very unhealed ego, very focused on my fears, on stress. And starting businesses achieved a lot for me because I grew up feeling very overwhelmed. And that was my, it's uncomfortable, but that was my comfort zone. Was feeling overwhelmed. And when you start a business, and maybe 2 businesses, and maybe 3 businesses, it keeps you in a perpetual state of overwhelm. And at some point, you can only do that for so long before things start to break. And so we had something happen at work that was it felt so heavy to me that I really had to stop and take a look inward and say, I can't keep doing this way. Where am I playing a role? Because I cannot control what all of these other people are doing, but there's a pattern that keeps repeating itself in my life. And I have to start to wonder where I am continuing that pattern, because it's not just everyone else doing it to me. And so at that point, I started to do some real basic personal work. And that was like reading Louise Hayes and reading Gabby Bernstein, and really like not even professional books, just diving deep on a personal level. What is not working in my life and how do I shift that? Because I had my professional life that I was struggling with, but it was connected to my personal life. So I started with the personal, and I really dove in, and I started to understand, what thoughts do I keep having that are creating this reality for me? What actions do I keep taking that keep drawing the same kind of people in, and so on. And as I did that personal work, I started looking around and realizing my whole professional landscape was changing with it. And that was a bonus that I desperately needed. But I was so focused on just surviving as a human that I didn't even know it was going to shift everything else professionally. So I started to get really interested in that. Like, oh, you really do have to look inward in order to lead outward. Because if you're not leading yourself well, it's impossible to lead other people well. And as that shift happened, I started to love my job. I loved leading other people. I loved serving other people. I loved showing up as the best version of myself. And so it was such a journey that I did not intend. I really just was trying to survive a personal rock bottom and stop with the addiction to overwhelm that I had created. And then from there, I started to be like, wow, my whole professional world is actually healing along with me.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, thank you for sharing that. And that's so true, right? Like we have to go inward first, and then we see the ripple effect outward. Cristine, can you talk a little bit about that from a therapeutic view position?
Yeah, and I love that you use that word overwhelm, because I think that is a word that, we use kind of flippantly, like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, or, I just feel like, everything's coming at me, but we don't know how to really start like peeling the layers back on that. And I think when you said, I had some really, early wounding that I hadn't addressed, and you were looking at your thoughts, what that kind of tells me, is when we're doing leadership, oftentimes as women, we kind of show up with this internalized ego wounding, right? So we look very self-sufficient, we look very capable, but we also overfunction. So we become overfunctioners. We're like, I'm going to start this business and this business. And then really all that's doing is creating this cycle within us that we're kind of avoiding some of the work that we need to do, but we look good trying to do it, right? And it is a personal thing that we get to a place where like, whoa, I cannot continue, that we end up starting to step back and no longer over functioning for all of these different roles. And then things can kind of fall into an alignment when we do our own work, and we don't have to show up to do this and to do that. And, I've got this and I've got that. We get to be in alignment and let other people show up in spaces that they're supposed to show up in too. So I love that word overwhelm is such a great way to identify when inner work really needs to be done.
Yes. It's like you're reading my diary. You're absolutely right.
It's so weird. I feel like I've been there too.
I know.
Me too. I think I met you all there.
Yeah. And that external validation that comes with it. I mean, the number of people who would say to me, I don't know how you do it. I mean, that was just like a high for me. And now I get really excited when people say, wow, you seem really happy, or you seem really at peace. Whereas before, I just wanted people to be like, how do you do it? Oh my gosh, it's so much. And I was like, I know, it's crazy. So
right. Wow.
Really
That's it.
And when you start to validate yourself through all of that inner work, you don't really need all of the external validation anymore.
You're so true. You're so true. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
And what you said about we create environments that feel familiar, that may not be healthy, but they are familiar. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. I grew up just for a variety of reasons. Part of it as simply as being the oldest sibling, even something that's not even nothing was wrong, but even little details like that piled on top of each other, and really feeling like I needed to be a performer who made my parents proud and looked a certain way and did a certain thing. I didn't recognize that I grew up a lot of my life feeling overwhelmed. That was my norm. And so, of course, when you don't heal that and you go out into the world, you're going to recreate whatever that familiar feeling is. So that was how it showed up for me. And that can be to the positive and the negative. If you grow up in a family where you feel entirely supported and loved, you're probably going to go out and seek that as well. So for me, that was how it showed up, the overwhelmed piece. And just like, I need to perform and look a certain way and distract from certain things in my family, but also highlight other parts of my family and be the older sibling who's making it easier. So it was a lot. And as I did this inner work, I started to really recognize that. And when I could see what it was really based off of, it was actually very easy to let go of. Once I could see it, it was so simple to be like, oh, that's interesting. I don't need to do that anymore. And it was the seeing it was the hard part. The stopping it was actually for me the easy part.
Yeah. I think when you see it, you understand when you see it, there's almost like this relief of that, this isn't something inherently wrong with me. This is a pattern that was kind of established, and doing the work, can be very freeing. A lot of the work prior to that awareness piece is really just kind of wrapping your head around, I no longer have to believe this or perform in this way. And then acknowledging it and moving through it with some of the work can be a lot easier. And, in internal family systems, we have the managers, which is, how we've decided to show up into this world to manage, all those false belief systems. So when you can really identify those thoughts, like you were saying, you can show up in a totally different way to decondition yourself. And I think that's something that people need to hear, is that to not be overwhelmed with that work. To use overwhelm, there's no perfect way to do it. There's no right way to do it. You just have to kind of show up for it. So,
And I think it shows a level of a growth mindset that you were seeking this information. You're like, okay, I'm not just I know there's a better way. I'm not going to just live in this. This doesn't feel good. I'm not thriving. The people around me aren't thriving. So let me do some internal work. Let's go inside and take a look. And as opposed to, I'm going to get rid of you and you've got to go. And it's okay. Let me look at the X in this equation. Basically. I love that. On one of your posts on Instagram, you talked about your staffing and how people comment about how happy they are and how, the energy that's always, positive. And you went on to talk about how it's not about happiness, it's about alignment. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So this all stemmed from back in that original time when I said everything was just falling apart and I really felt like I didn't know what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I started to read somewhere about company core values, and really my business, the main business is Side Street Cafe. So that's kind of the big one. And at the time I started to realize this business is such an extension of me. And I'm in this process of understanding my own values. And I want to understand what those look like from my business's perspective. And the people who I surround myself with day after day at work, I want to feel in alignment with them. And what a gift that I'm in a position where I get to make those choices. At the time, I was doing all the hiring. So if I got very clear on the type of person that I wanted to surround myself with and have in my business, it made hiring so much easier. It was so easy for me to spot, for the most part. It's not like it's perfect, but you have just a better groundwork that you're coming from, where you're like, no, these are the things that matter. These are my non-negotiables, or these values. And you can really ask them interview questions around those values and allowing those values to drive the types of questions. And you can very quickly see if this is someone who's in alignment, because their energy will perk up when they talk about intentions, or when they talk about, change. One of our values is embracing change to grow, partly because our physical building is constantly changing. My husband's a builder, and the people who didn't work out great with us, they did not enjoy change.
Yeah.
And they didn't really seek growth. So when I find people who are like, change is exciting, I love to grow, I'm like, oh, good, you're going to fit great here because we're constantly growing and changing. So that has been a long, I'd say we've probably had our values in place for about 5 years, and I'm about ready to tweak them a little bit because we're changing and growing, and we're going to refine them a little bit. But that has been such a gift for the people, for all of us as a team, to know this is where we are. And we've made mistakes. We've had people in the building maybe for too long who weren't in alignment. And then in hindsight, we're like, oh, it was so obvious in hindsight, but in the moment we didn't see it, and kind of giving ourselves grace in that. Yeah.
That's so great, because so often with hiring, we have a position or a role that needs to be filled, and then we just, insert person here, right?
Yeah,
and it's like, no, that's you are creating an energetic, embodied space, with all the different people that you bring in. And so when your focus shifts from, that more, corporate managerial to the people, I think, once again, those soft skills that Cristine and I talk about that are so kind of, soft skills, and no, those are valuable. And that's what you're using those softer skills to create a strong business. And I love that.
Yeah, thank you. And I really feel, just through conversations with staff, they enjoy working for a place that feels in alignment to them. We're not for everyone. I'm not saying the way that our values are the right values, but they're right for us. And that's helping us to attract the right people so that we can all be in alignment. And it's energizing for them and for us and for the customers who come in and feel that. So I think that that's been like a really key piece to what came from the personal development. And I'm like, wait, I'm figuring out my values. What about our business values? And how does this play? And that was that ripple out that you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was really wise of you to differentiate between happy and alignment, because I think when we say happy, we're really just focusing on like one vibration, and there's this expectation that we have to stay there. But alignment really is about being able to move through, vibrations, and it not take you down, and it not also set you up to feel like I have to feel like this all the time, or everybody else is going to be disappointed. You can be frustrated and irritated maybe with something that's going on within the business, but you can move through it when you're aligned, because you're really working with yourself and not against yourself. So I think that's a really wise way of phrasing how alignment really does vibrate to other people, and you can feel it too. And not that they are always walking around like happy and joyful and with so much gratitude, but they can definitely move through those vibrations with ease and keeping a peaceful environment around themselves. So I think that's for business development, in leadership, really being able to understand the type of people, like you said, is important when you're developing and bringing new people in or shifting roles, to see if that's really something that they are aligned for.
Oh yeah, for sure. And one little other piece that was coming to mind as you were talking is that this does apply to your personal life too, and understanding your own values and who is in alignment with you. So where I took that and applied it to business, you can take that and apply it to your friendships or how you operate with your children. There's so many ways to lead your own life using that same concept, whether it's inside or outside of business.
100%.
Yeah. And, I think it goes almost counterintuitive to what we've been taught, where, friendships, if someone's in your life and you're struggling, well, you try harder, you work harder, you try to fix it, especially if you're an internalizer, right? Like, I'm going to fix this, right? Well, maybe that person shouldn't be in your life. Maybe, they're taking up valuable space for someone that's going to vibrate at a higher level with you. And I think so often, we get stuck in these the rules that we're supposed to live by, right? And so I love that it's being so discerning about who you allow in your energetic field. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
With being, so excuse me, with a small business owner, our decisions that are made are often made on the fly, and we get immediate feedback from the people that work with us and for us. I mean, you don't, in a big corporation, you have the suite, the B-suite, and then goes down, and they don't even know how these decisions are really impacting the people who are, doing the work. So you get that automatic feedback. So what kind of ego work has gone into that constant relationship building and trust building?
Yeah, the more that I learn to understand my own ego and see it clearly, not really with judgment, just like, okay, I see you, ego, you're there. The more I can identify it easily when I'm working with other people or talking with other people. And it's very apparent to me when it's their ego that's reacting. And that's okay, because that's always going to happen. And there are moments where I show up with my ego. There's nothing wrong with that. But being able to see it allows me to not be as reactive. And I can help to bring the conversation back to a place where it's not out of fear. Like, that's my main thing. Am I operating out of my ego? The main way I can tell is, am I operating out of fear? And if I am, then I need to redirect. So when I see other people reacting out of fear, I don't get reactive to them, because I'll think, oh, they're just in a place of fear. That's totally understandable. If roles were reversed, maybe I would be too. Maybe I can reassure them. Maybe we can have these conversations that will bring us back to a place where we're more trusting. We're in less fear. So I would say I am less reactive now to other people's egos than I used to be. When I would see other people in a place of fear, I would get afraid, and then we'd be doing this whole push and pull. And now it's kind of like I can manage my own energy, and I can understand it's my job to manage myself, really, and how I'm showing up to a situation. And almost always the energy that I'm giving out is going to come back to me. So if I'm managing my own ego and my own energy, there's a good chance I'll get that back. And if I don't, I can almost always solve it with clear conversation. And just kind conversation can almost always solve anything. I love the direct feedback. I love how quickly I can know if something's working or not working. It would drive me crazy to be so removed that I was so out of touch, that's really fun for me. And I feel a really great sense of connection from that, and being able to make decisions, but really consider how it's impacting other people, and really even ask them directly. My ego is so in such a healthy place now that I have no shame in going to an employee and saying, I'm kind of torn about what to do. We've got these, I respect your opinion. And it's not that I'm going to do what they say, but I have no fear in going to them and saying, I'm kind of torn. What do you think? Let's talk about it. And that builds a stronger relationship for us too.
Yeah. And I think leadership in general, when you've done that ego and are continuing to do that ego work, because we're never finished with it. But yeah, I mean, you can sit and be present with people if it's conflict, or if it's concern, or if it's fear, like you're saying. That is, I think, the beauty of doing this work and being in leadership positions at different times, is being able to be present and respond to their concerns, rather than escalate out of your own fear and your own anxieties surrounding, your thoughts and ideas. So there is a different energy in leadership. And I think with the people that you lead, when you can be present with that, with them in that space. And that's the difference between, a wounded ego that does more fear-based reactions, and, a healing ego that can be present and available and still solution focused in leadership. So I think that's, what you're communicating is that response versus react.
Yep. You sum it up so well. And also, just the more I am able, or the more any leader is able to show up really proud of who they are and not trying to cover their tracks or feel, like be
Mhm.
over here putting on different masks. There's
Mm.
so much more energy available to problem solve and
Gotcha.
to stay open. And because I don't do everything right, and I never would ever claim that I did. So if I show up to a conversation and someone's telling me that they were hurt by something I did or they wish I'd done it differently, I'm open to that. And I'm very
Right.
like, oh, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. It's
Mm.
not this energy of, well, I'm your boss and you better respect me. And
Mhm.
that is fear-based. That's
It-
fear-based that you're losing power. And the
Mhm.
more real I can be with someone, the more connected we are, and then the more effective whatever solution will be.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned in one of your posts that you have 2 questions that you ask.
Mhm.
And I was like, this is brilliant because you can do this in, once again, everything in your life. And the 2 questions are, what is going well and
Mhm.
what needs our attention, what needs worked on. And can you elaborate on that? I think that's so brilliant.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So is that when I was talking about, I mean, of course, I'm like, yes, those are 2 brilliant questions. I don't remember exactly.
You are brilliant.
I'm like, I do need to ask those questions.
You're like,
But yeah, I mean, in any situation for sure that you can break down something that feels really daunting and huge and just break it right down to, okay, what is going well and what needs our attention. And I love those little hacks that will take something that feels giant and scary and hard and just break it right down. And all, if it's involving other people, really get on the same page. What's going well, because when you're looking at what's going well, it's raising your energy, it's raising your esteem. You're really feeling like, okay, it's not all doom and gloom,
Yeah.
and not what's going wrong, but what needs our attention. Because I will tell you, and my husband and I say this all the time, anything we pay attention to in our business improves. And there's something that constantly needs our attention.
Mhm.
But whatever it is, if we as a group say this is what needs our attention, it will absolutely improve. And so that really is our way of taking these big things that feel unmanageable and just making them manageable.
Mm.
That's like the gist of how I try to share what I've learned, because I took the long way. I like read
Mhm.
every book and listened to every podcast and did all these different programs, and I'm so grateful for them. But I also am like, can we just simplify this?
Yes.
Can we just
Yeah.
make it simpler?
And I think a lot of solutions do require, and moving out of that energy of overwhelm, right?
Mhm.
And allowing ourselves to just simplify.
Yeah.
And simplification actually feels really in alignment with most types. We can just simplify things and just kind of micro, move through things. That sense of overwhelm tends to dissipate just in that one step of simplifying. So that's great advice for anybody who is either looking to get started or in the midst of an overwhelming season.
Yes.
What works, what's working, what is not working is a great action, exercise to start looking at where do we just need to focus right now.
Yeah, it's often not as big as it feels in your head when you really put it down, either in paper or when you verbalize it. It's like, it's actually something very small that's not working right now. And when we pay attention to it, it can be improved. Maybe not completely fixed, but when we pay attention to it, it will improve.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I so love that, where you put your attention, that's where the energy flows, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah, that's so good. And I agree with you, Cristine. It's like, and what Jenna said about just because something looks big doesn't mean it is big. That type of thing. And, I think a lot of people don't start, whether it's personal work or going down a new path, because it seems so large. It seems overwhelming. There's that overwhelming word, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so they're like, well, I might as well not even try. And, it can be as simple as looking at something and saying, okay, what is working? What is not working, and digging into it. Now, as a leader, and both Cristine and Jenna, you both lead teams. I've led teams in the past, and right now I work directly one-on-one with clients, so my leadership style is a little different now. But as a leader of teams, when you go to people and say what is working and what isn't working, what is there a fear that they're going to tell you what's not working and you're going to be like, oh, another on my to-do list? Like, how do you manage that anxiety that rises up, because we're all very busy people, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes. So in the past, for sure, I did not want to ask that question, because if they told me something that I had to add to my list, I'd be freaking out about it. And I was so defensive. I didn't want to know what wasn't working because I wanted to look like I had it all together. And so that was not something I was open to. But now hearing what isn't working from people, I genuinely do enjoy it. It doesn't mean I can jump on it and fix it immediately, but I've taken that pressure off of myself, and I can be real with them. And I can say, wow, I hear you. You're probably right. I know that that's not something that I can fix overnight, but I have heard you, and I'm going to be watching that. Like, I don't have to lie to them and say, okay, by tomorrow it'll be fixed. So as long as I stay true and authentic in how I'm communicating with them, it does not create anxiety for me. Mm-hmm. No one likes to hear where you're quote unquote failing, but I really do try to reframe it as areas to improve, not the areas I'm failing, but areas to improve. And little changes in my language like that can make such a difference in how I perceive whatever they're saying. A big part of it for me is their intention behind saying it, because if they're sharing that with me because they are intending to help and grow and make what's happening better, then how could I possibly be upset about that? If they're sharing it from a place of like spitefulness, and you can tell if that energy, that is pretty off-putting for me. I'm not going to lie. I'm very quickly to be like, meh. That's not what I'm looking for. But if their intention is pure and my intention is pure, then that conversation is amazing, regardless of what the topic is.
Yeah.
What about you, Cristine? Do you find that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, intention behind what is being brought to you is really everything. That in and of itself has an energy that we're going to receive, and can we receive it in a space of, we can find solutions to this, or do I need to receive this from a space of, I'm wondering if somebody on my team is not feeling seen, not feeling heard, or they need to be, witnessed as far as, showing up in this space. Because if they're showing up in frustration, or they're bitter, or some of these themes that, you can kind of see that they're owning it, then there may need to be some like one-on-one work, of, are they being seen? Are they being heard? What projects are they working on that may not be in alignment for them? And that, I think, goes to you, Jena, really knowing the type of people that you're hiring, and what lights them up, and what they're really good at, and what they enjoy doing. Know those things about the people on your team. And if they show up in a space and they're like, hey, I'd really like to take the lead on doing this. And you're like, whoa, you know what? Like, I didn't even realize we needed that, but yes, please. And then, highlighting and sharing that with others. When there are concerns, it's easier to receive those concerns when you are also, being in an energy of supporting and highlighting, because as a leader, and especially through growth, it can feel like all that comes at you are concerns, and you can, even in your best self-work, show up in reactions, right? Because you're like, not even towards that person, but just because you feel overwhelmed again. So I think intention behind what is being brought to you is so important, to sit with that for a second and be like, is this something that we need to highlight and start finding solutions, or is this something that we need to be working with the team member with? And those are two very different things to do as a business owner, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay. Do you, Jena, do you find that you were talking about how, you were struggling in your personal life, and then you saw, with yourself, and then you saw the impact on the business. Do you see the positive impact on the business impacting your personal life? Like, do you see the flip side of that now?
They are so connected. It really is an extension of me. It's a huge part of my life. So when there's very little division. Now I see there's very little division between them. And the healthier the business is, and the more it's full of positive people who are solution focused and all of the great things I can say, the more at peace my life is, because I can go on a hike, or I can spend an afternoon with my child, or I don't have to be constantly putting out fires at work. And so absolutely, I'm at my very best. I mean, I don't know if this is, I'm at my best when my business is at its best, and my business is at its best when I'm at my best. So there is no division. There's like a very thin line of division right there, but that's a good question. And it's very true.
Would you share any advice you have for leaders out there who are maybe struggling or wanting to become leaders, people who are wanting to step into that role?
Yeah, I would say there's so many good resources like podcasts and books, and there's a lot of that out there. And for sure, that was a part of what my work was just educating myself and trying to have conversations like this with people who knew more than I did, so I could piece together what was going wrong. But at the crux of it, it was, like I said, really looking at the patterns that kept happening and then getting curious about it and not afraid of it, but like, why do I keep thinking that? Two big thoughts, like the big ego thoughts that came up for me and continue to, and maybe will for the rest of my life, is the idea that I'm too serious. That's something I was told a lot, and or I felt a lot, and that my voice wasn't really valuable. And those are things that weren't necessarily said to me, but things happened throughout my life. So as a result, I had a hard time standing in my power as a leader because I didn't want to look too serious. Or I wouldn't use my voice because I felt like, well, nobody wants to hear me anyway. I didn't realize I was doing that. Of course, it was all subconscious. But when I started to really look at the patterns that kept happening, what is the similarity between this employee that made me feel that way and that employee that made me feel that way? And start to really look at the patterns and dig into it, so much was revealed to me. And like we said earlier in the conversation, once you can see something, it is like almost hard to continue doing it. I mean, really, you have a little bit of the old habits, but you start to be like, oh no, wait, I'm just doing that because of this. I don't need to do that anymore. So when you start to look at the patterns, I would say for anyone who's struggling right now, really take it home, like inward home, and do that personal work. If you're in a crisis situation and you need to take action immediately at work, just keep doing the next right thing. Just keep like simply taking the next right step and really look at, here's the landscape, what's the next right thing to do, and just stay focused. It's like in the program, one day at a time, 1 minute at a time, one decision at a time. That I would say is the best if you're in like a crisis at work and you don't have the skills or the that personal development piece yet. But when the dust settles, really start to do the personal work, and you will find everything outside of that will start to change. Even your friendships, your relationships, your work, everything will change with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So good. Yeah, that's great advice. That is so good. Cristine, do you have any questions for Jena?
I would like, you touched on it there just a second ago, a little bit about imposter syndrome. You were kind of like, being afraid to share this insight or to really own your, what the decisions you've made, or, so how have you navigated through some of that imposter syndrome?
I think that when I was coming up through it, there was this big concept of fake it till you make it, and that a lot of people will fake it till they make it. And I get it. And I did a post on this too. Like, I understand where there's value in that. But when you're trying to build relationships, you can't be fake. And so the more I faked it, the more walls I was building, because people could sense that. So imposter syndrome made me do a lot of that faking. That was this idea I had in my head, like, oh, I'll just put on a brave face and do it. When really, the more I could have let that guard down and said, I can't tell you how many times now today I'll be like, I've never been through this before. So let's navigate it together. Or I've never been through this before, but I'm going to call someone who has. And being more authentic about that, I think really is a great way to deal with imposter syndrome, because you don't have to have it all figured out, and you don't have to pretend that you do. In fact, the more you pretend, the less out of touch you appear. And the more people are like, I actually low-key can't trust you because you're
right.
you're like not in touch with reality. So I think I did it the wrong way, which was that faking, when now anytime I start to feel imposter syndrome, I'll just own it and be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. But I'll tell you what, I've figured out a lot of stuff in my life, and I'll figure this out too. And people know that's true because they've seen it and they appreciate that I'm being real with them.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, my answer 5 years ago is very different from my answer now. Those are the two different ways that you can go through it.
And I think in leadership, there is a shifting of not trying to put out there too much of that fake it till you make it, but lead with authenticity of, yeah, this was really hard for our business, or yeah, we're really proud of that facet of what we've been able to do with that product or concept, but without creating, I guess, some kind of drama behind it,
Yeah, that's right. I never really thought about it that way, but I just as I started to get more authentic with myself, like, our social media became more transparent. Everything just had that voice behind it. But yeah, you don't want to make it a dramatic thing, but you're just being real, like what you're proud of, what you overcame, what you're still figuring out. COVID, oh my gosh, as a business owner, COVID, that really made me.
Oh yeah.
If I was
Especially in your businesses. Yeah.
If I was never going to admit that I didn't know what I was doing, I mean, daily I was like, well, we don't know what we're doing, but we're just going to keep doing the next best thing that we could do. And it was hard and it was exhausting, but I learned some serious lessons about the sky isn't going to fall when you admit that you don't know. And when you leave things up to change, really, really made me learn some new things through that, as I'm sure.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because the pandemic, especially, I mean, you're in Bar Harbor, which is a seasonal, business model, right? So you have this huge influx of people during the warmer months, and then winter gets very quiet and you can recharge and regroup. But then your entire business was impacted by that. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because so many leaders at that point, they just threw their hands up and businesses just folded, and a lot of times through no fault of their own. But you were able to stay steady through that, correct? And come out the other side.
Yeah, and it really was a lot of what I've been talking about, and that's being authentic about what you're going through. And I mean, imagine if we had gone through that and I'd been like, nothing to see here, everything's fine. Everyone would have looked at us and been like, you're not in touch with reality. This isn't, I don't understand why you're even acting like this. And we were able to just keep doing the next right thing. And it changed every day, as it did for every business owner, especially in food service. It was like, one day it's all takeout, one day it's 50% seating. And keeping your staff through that, the more I could communicate authentically with the staff, the more at peace they were and trusting of me. So it was like layers of how you communicate with customers, how you communicate with staff. And what I'm saying isn't new. Like, every small business owner probably could say the exact same thing that I'm saying now, but it made me take my bar that I originally had here, and it gave me permission to lower my bar and feel like that's just where the bar is right now. And I have to be okay with it.
Well, I love that.
It's very free.
You were managing yourself as well during that time, because you were having this same experience that everyone else was, which was fear-based, because we didn't know what was happening to ourselves, our families, our communities, and then our businesses, right? And our livelihoods. But you had to manage that for yourself first and foremost, or you in no way could have led the people that were depending on you.
Yes, I had to really manage how I showed up, and that was all I could do. That was such a reminder. We say that all the time, like, you can only control what you're doing. That was a time where you genuinely had to face that fact. And it was great practice. And I continue to do that now. I just have to manage how I show up to these situations.
Jena, this is so great. I'm sure we would love to have you back and have leadership part 2 and dig deeper into this, because what you've offered here, of course, is, your journey and how you've taken these steps. But we would love to talk with you deeper on really guiding other leaders along the path. What do you think, Cristine?
I would love that. Absolutely.
It was so good.
You know,
And
that too. It's a fun conversation. It's my favorite thing to talk about. So when people ask to talk about it, I'm like, oh, okay.
That's great. I'm so glad.
well, and to see someone, you know, embracing their ego work on a public platform, you know, Cristine and I are doing that here, and you're doing it on your platforms, and you know, more people that see others doing it and sharing their journeys, it's going to empower them and give them permission to do it as well and share it. So thank you so much once again. Follow Jena on Instagram. You will not be disappointed. I can guarantee that, at Jena Young 2.0. We'll put it in the description at the bottom here as well. And also we'll share all the links. So if you're going to get to Bar Harbor, Maine anytime soon, check out Jena at Thrive Juice Bar and Kitchen, the Side Street Cafe, and the Yellow House Inn. And I have to say, I spent some time in Bar Harbor and I miss Thrive. I mean, I miss, you know, the cafe as well, but man, I really love Thrive.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
I still have the glass I carry everywhere I go. So yeah, for my smoothies. So good. All right. Cristine, do you have anything to offer?
No, just thank you so much, Jena, for being a part of the conversation and just being, you know, a light in the space for, you know, business owners and leadership and especially women in business. I think, you know, there's a lot of ego work we have to do. I think ego work, it has a connotation that it's, you know, for these high-powered CEOs that are men, but we all need to do it. And I think women, you know, we have another layer that we have to navigate through in business. So I appreciate you coming on and just, you know, giving us a little glimpse into your light.
Yeah, thank you. Loved it.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. We will see you next time on the Ego Project. And goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.